Welcome back to your nightmares, my children. This is Mr. Midnight speaking. I welcome you all to my humble abode. All Hallows Eve is just around the bend. Let's welcome this time of fear, scares, and evil with two Halloween themed stories. Let's begin, and always remember, the darkness always follows. I will now leave you with my narrator, so enjoy.
Warning to the people in the Portland, Oregon metro area this Halloween. This really freaked me out. Yesterday, I noticed my neighbor hadn't put out all his Halloween decoration, lights, etc. The past 2 years I've lived next to him, he's gone all out for Halloween. I don't know him well. He's younger, single, but I know he likes kids. Not in a creepy way. His brother and sister-in-law and their kids are always visiting him, and he plays with his 3 young nieces and nephews out in the yard. So anyway, I got home from work and was walking up my driveway, and I saw him outside and said something like, "Hey man, you better get your Halloween stuff up, or the house up the street is going to beat you for the best decorations." He kind of smiles sheepishly and says that he's actually going to keep his house dark this year and just put candy out. I asked if he was going out of town, but he said no. Something happened last year that really scared him. Now, I was concerned for my own safety if some weirdos were coming around our neighborhood, which is a pretty safe neighborhood with tons of young families living here. So I asked him what happened. He said last year he had his brother's family over so they could trick or treat in the neighborhood, since they live in an apartment complex that doesn't do much for Halloween. He had a bunch of kids come to the door like always. His family took off around 10:30, and there were only a few older trick-or-treaters. But by 11:30, they were pretty much done. So he was inside watching TV, and the doorbell rings. He grabs the candy ball and heads over, noticing that it's a little past midnight, and that's pretty rude for trick-or-treaters to still be out. But then notices he hasn't turned off all his decoration lights yet, so his lights are a beacon. He swings the door open and is about to yell "Boo!" or something to freak them out, but stops dead when he sees the kids at the door. He said one was probably around 13 to 14 and the other around 16, 17. Both boys. They weren't dressed up, but he remembers the older one was wearing a flannel checkered shirt. He was immediately overcome with uneasiness, like opening the door was a huge mistake. They just stared at him, and he noticed they had really big irises and dilated pupils. He couldn't even see the whites of their eyes, so he figured they were contact lenses. He was frozen there, holding the candy ball, like he couldn't slam the door in their face as much as he wanted to. So he nervously tried to smile at them, hoping they would break character and ask for candy or something. The younger one said they had gotten lost and needed to come in and use his phone. That was when he closed the door, more than halfway on them, and said, "No, sorry." And the older one said something like, "Can we just wait in your house until our parents come get us?" But by then he was convinced that his life was in danger, and these kids must be high or something, or intending to rob him. And he just kept mumbling, "No, sorry, good night," as he inched the door closed and locked it. He told me he was so bloody scared at that point, that they were going to try to break in through one of his windows or something. But he looked through the peephole and they had turned to leave. He watched TV with the volume really low so he could hear any sounds at all. And he said he stayed up till like 5 a.m. because he was too scared to go to bed and drop his guard. The whole time he's telling me this, I'm thinking, oh my god, this sounds so familiar, just like the Black-Eyed Kids urban legend. Then I thought, hey, maybe this dude is trying to scare me because after all, he does have the Halloween spirit. So I'm looking at him incredulously, but trying not to seem too gullible. So I'm like, man, this is really crazy. Sounds like the Black-Eyed Kids. He just looks at me blankly. The what? Is that a movie or something? And I said no, but told him to go look it up online. Like an hour later, I get a knock on my door and admittedly almost jump out my skin thinking it's a demon child. It was my neighbor and his eyes were freaking huge. He swears to me up and down that he had never heard of the Black-Eyed Children before, and it's so similar to what happened to him. So we talked a while longer and I told him that quite a few people probably know about that urban legend, and it's possible it was just teenagers with black scleral contacts trying to freak people out on Halloween, which would be genius by the way. But he said the fear he felt was so primal and came over him the second he opened the door for them. Anyway guys, beware. I guess Halloween would definitely be the perfect cover for them. When it snows on Halloween. Halloween is a big deal in my town. Every house goes all out in a competition to see who can freak out the most kids. Luckily for us, they also compete to see who can give out the best candy. It's pretty great. And this year, my friends and I were finally old enough to go trick-or-treating alone. I spent all day getting ready with my friends Ashley and Sherry. I was going as a vampire. Ashley was a witch and Sherry was a werewolf. I was just putting some fake blood around my mouth as a finishing touch when Ashley gasped. What's wrong? I asked without taking my eyes away from the mirror. It's snowing. Shiz. Remember when I said Halloween was a big deal in my town? Yeah, well, snow on Halloween was an even bigger deal in my town. It only happened once in my lifetime, and that was 10 years ago when I was 2. So I don't remember it at all. But that didn't matter. Every year in the days leading up to Halloween, the grown-ups in town would drill it into our heads that snow on Halloween was a bad sign, and that if it snowed, we had to follow the rules. The rules were, if it snows on Halloween, every trick-or-treater wearing a mask will be asked to take it off before they can get candy. If you are wearing a mask, you must take it off before taking any candy. If someone refuses to take off their mask, do not offer them candy and do not speak to them. We didn't know the why behind the rules, but honestly, I didn't care. Sherry was the only one of us wearing a mask after all. Sucks to be you, Sherry, I joked. Hope that giant fur ball of a mask is easy to take off and on. Yeah, Sherry, Michaela and I will leave you behind if you aren't fast enough, Ashley said with a laugh. Very funny, guys. The good news was that we were staying at Ashley's house for the night, and her mum wasn't much of a nagger, so I figured she'd give us a quick reminder of the rules as we went out the door, and that would be it. My mum, on the other hand, was a definite nagger. I could sense her phone call before my cell phone even rang. Yes, Mum, I said as soon as I answered. not letting her get a word in. Sherry's the only one wearing a mask, and she knows to take it off before getting candy. We won't talk to anyone who doesn't take their mask off. Blah 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 blah. Love you and see you tomorrow. I hung up and giggled. Parents, am I right? After one last look at our costumes to make sure they were perfect, we tumbled out the front door and into the snowy neighborhood. Our plan was to start at the house next door and work our way around the neighborhood as the night got darker. The inner streets had some seriously creepy looking houses, and we wanted to hit those when it was good and dark out for maximum creep factor. Do you think Josh and the guys will be out? Ashley asked as we headed up the walkway to the nearest house. She had an obvious crush on Josh, but swore up and down that she didn't. No idea, Ash, I said as I rang the doorbell. Trick or treat! As the night went on, Sherry got pretty quick at ripping her mask off. Her head the second she was asked. I had to give it to her because she put it back on every time. I know the mask completed the werewolf costume, but I probably would have just left it off after the 4th or 5th house. Just before 9 o'clock, we hit the last house in the neighborhood. They were known to give out 2 full-size candy bars at the end of the night just to get rid of them. We ran past a group of kids who were just leaving and bounded up the steps. Trick or treat! What great costumes. Go ahead and take 2 bars if you'd like, the woman at the door said. But you two will have to take off your masks first. 2? I looked over at Sherry and saw another kid standing next to her. She was dressed as a scarecrow with a burlap sack over her head. The mouth was crookedly stitched on and the eye holes were jaggedly cut. I shivered and looked away. Jumped some kid trying to get their last bit of candy like we were before the neighborhood shut off their porch lights and turned in for the night. I reached into the plastic pumpkin the woman was holding out and grabbed a Twix and a Milky Way. I looked over at Sherry, who was pulling off a mask. The scarecrow stood still next to her, her mask still on. Ashley grabbed the 2 bars and nudged Sherry. Come on, Murphy, let's go. Sherry grabbed the candy and turned to the scarecrow. Hey kid, you gotta take your mask off if you want any candy. Sherry, you can't talk to him, I blurted out. What? She looked confused for a second before her mistake dawned on her. Oh no, the rules. Sherry had moved to town 3 years ago, so the rules weren't as engraved in her as they were in Ashley and I. We looked at the woman at the door nervously, hoping she would tell us the rules were just some silly made-up thing to make Halloween seem more scary. Instead, a look of pure terror crossed her face, and she yanked the plastic pumpkin back to her chest. Run, she whispered, before slamming her door shut and clicking the lock. Ashley and I grabbed Sherry and pulled her down the stairs. We couldn't help but scream, though we didn't know why exactly the woman was so afraid. As we rounded the corner of the sidewalk, I turned to look behind us. I let out a shriek when my eyes met the jagged, empty eye holes of the scarecrow's mask. She was right behind us. Faster, I yelled, pulling on my friend's hands as I sprinted down the sidewalk towards Ashley's house. If we could just make it inside, we'd be safe from whatever this thing chasing was. Over the ragged grasps of our breath as we ran, I heard the sound of straw rubbing together as the scarecrow gained on us. Finally, I saw the illuminated front porch of Ashley's house. The 3 of us sprinted up the front steps faster than we'd ever dreamed of running in gym class. Ashley reached for the doorknob and froze. It was locked. She fumbled for her key, as Sherry and I pounded on the door for her mum to open up. I could hear the rustling sound of the scarecrow getting louder. Just when I thought my heart would beat straight out of my chest, Ashley swung the door open and pulled us inside. She slammed the door shut and locked it before turning the porch light off. As we collapsed on the floor, gasping for air, my eyes turned to the side table by the door. On it was a piece of notebook paper. I picked it up and read it quickly before crumbling it up. Your mum got called in for an emergency shift at the hospital, Ash. We're alone. Before Ashley could respond, there was a loud bang on the front door. The scarecrow was here, and it was mad. We have to barricade the door, I said, standing up and grabbing the side table. Ashley got up and grabbed the other side of the table so we could move it up against the door, while Sherry dragged over a chair from the living room. Bang! Something hit the window above us as the front door number rattled at the same time. Is there more than one of them? Sherry asked. No idea, but we need to get away from the door now, I said as I scrambled for the staircase. I figured being off the ground floor was safest. We ran into Ashley's room and started pushing her desk up against the door. I was pretty sure the scarecrow outside was no ordinary kid, and I didn't want to find out what would happen if it got to us. Guys, I'm sorry, Sherry said through choked sobs. I didn't even think. I just thought it was some dumb kid and I... It's okay, Cher, I said. We're going to be okay. Bang! All three of us shrieked in unison as Ashley's bedroom window shook from the force of being hit. I turned to look and saw those jagged, empty eye holes pressed up against the window. How did it get up here? Ashley screamed. I don't know, but we need to hide, I said. Follow me. I ran to the closet and ushered them inside, closing the door tight behind us. We huddled together behind Ashley's hanging clothes, our backs pressed as far up against the closet wall as we could. The angry banging on Ashley's window continued. I braced myself for the sound of the window shattering from the force of the scarecrow's blows, but instead, another bang sounded from the door to Ashley's bedroom. Next, another from the window, then the door, then the window. Sherry wept beside me, while Ashley rocked back and forth. I prayed to God that I wouldn't skip school again, and I'd do all my chores, and I'd never ever do anything bad again if she'd let us live. The assault on Ashley's window and door went on for hours. I swore I could hear the rustling of straw rubbing together from just outside the closet door. I was certain the door would open at any second, and the thing dressed as a scarecrow would drag us all down to hell with it. But finally, the banging stopped. We waited in silence for minutes, huddled together in fear. Silence. I pulled out my cell phone and checked the time. 12:05 a.m. November the 1st. We made it.
Well, my children, I thank you all for listening. I hope these two scary stories about Halloween frightened you and got you in the mood for trick-or-treating. I'll see you again very soon. So until then, love the darkness, as it always follows.